right, let's talk in business. We're looking at revamping the power sector. Okay, now power sector issue has been a front burner issue in the last couple of days and even a week, with IMF taking very keen interest at Nigeria investing more in its power sector, and even the ongoing investigation into the power sector at the National Assembly, and then the talk by the federal government of revamping the power sector. According to the Minister for Finance, she says that there is already 1.3 trillion naira facilitated for the power sector by the World Bank and other international creditors. So let's look at the issues in the power sector. I've been joined by Dr. Osaze Iyoha, who's an economist. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's look at IMF interest. IMF has asked that Nigeria increase spending up to 18% of GDP on infrastructure between now and 2030. And they've also said that advocated $49 billion investment in the power sector. How do you see this? Now, for that kind of investment in the sector, that the Senate president says Nigeria loses $29 billion annually to power sector failure. Does that kind of sector deserve such investment again?
Okay. Good afternoon, viewers. The issue of the power sector has been a bone in the neck of the country over the years. You know, the problem for me has not been budgeting funds for the sector. It has been how much these funds have worked, how genuinely these funds have been invested into the equipment or whatever that it was budgeted for. The problem of the power sector is multifaceted.
Okay.
So it's difficult to even ask yourself, what parts of the sector will this investment be made? Because it's good to present, let's just do a small background on the problem of the power sector. Initially, it was NEPA that we knew as it was bundled. It was like a monopoly. NEPA, then with the coming of democracy, 1999 with the Obasanjo regime, he now felt that the problem was power generation. So then the country was almost reliant on Kainji Dam. So the government of Obasanjo putting money in revamping the power generation sector. But by 2005, he now noticed that the total power that was generated in the country was just about 1,500 megawatts, while the country as at that time needed about 30,000 megawatts to survive a day. So he now realized that he has to expand power generation, not just working on the existing facilities. So he now, by 2005, the Power Sector Act was passed. It became an act in 2005. Then he launched inaugurating or starting some other independent power plants. So that's when licenses were given for power plants. And by 6 months before he left, 10 power plants were started. Okay. But they were not completed before he left. So Yar'Adua's administration came. He noticed, the administration noticed that there was some corruption behind those, so he paused those projects. So for 2 years, nothing was happening in the power sector. On came the Jonathan administration. Those 10 power plants that the Obasanjo administration started, so that Papalanto, Olo-Oshogun, and so on, the Goodluck Jonathan administration started them again and commissioned them. So power generation increased from 1,500 megawatts of the Obasanjo regime to about 10,000 megawatts. So fine, at that point, the Buhari administration came and inherited those 10 power plants that were built by the Jonathan administration, existing with the 7 initial ones in Obasanjo. So they now found out that, okay, now we can generate 10. But what's happening with the transmission? Okay. That's when it was noted that the transmission sector could not transmit beyond 3,000, 4,000 megawatts.
So the other 7,000 was wasted.
Fine. So it was now found that it's the transmission that has to be worked on. So the deregulation, the Power Sector Act reform of the 2005, deregulated the power sector so that it unbundled NEPA, so that we now had 3 arms or 3 legs. The GENCOs who are to generate power, then the TCN, the Transmission Company of Nigeria, now transmit this power that has been generated to the discos. So the discos now distribute it to our various houses. Because the TCN, who are the transmission, can't take it directly to our houses. This power goes through those cables, which we normally call as power line. So you can't link it directly to your house. It will blow the entire house. So the transmission cables were found that they cannot take beyond 4,000 megawatts. So the Buhari administration said that it's not about power generation. So that now became the main problem. So that's where investments came, which you talk about. Initially, there was a 1.6 billion investment into that sector from donor agencies, loans, and so on. So the capacity increased, as we're told, to about 5,000 megawatts. It was also found out that now the discos are not taking this 5,000 that has even been transmitted to them. So that's the blame game that has been going on between the CCN and the discos. That even this 5,000 which we are complaining, or 4,000 which we are complaining that is small enough, the discos are not exhausting it. They are taking almost half, sometimes 2,000, so there's energy loss in the process. And these discos, when that is the arm that was really deregulated, privatized. When investors came into those sectors, they made promises. There was a performance act that they signed with the Bureau for Public Enterprise that they would provide meters, 4.92 meters, find 4.92 million meters in 3 years to consumers. But after 3 years, between 2015 when it was signed to 2018, it was found that they just provided 201,000, a far cry from the 4 million that was promised. So metering has been a problem. So they are not able to completely buy the 5,000 or 4,000 megawatts that TCN sends to them, because they are not able to measure what the consumers are taking from them.
Okay.
You understand? So the 2,000 megawatts that they are even, or half, whatever they take, is lost somewhere. Okay. Because not everybody is metered. So how do you measure what you are using? So buying like 2,000 megawatts from TCN, and at the end of the day, you are able to sell only 1,000. 1,000 is lost. And TCN has complained that the discos are owing them as much as 400 billion from unpaid power that was bought from them. So the question is, where do you invest these funds? I think so far the government has been investing it in the TCN, because the Transmission Company of Nigeria is the only sector of the 3 legs that has not been privatized. Okay. So it is 100% owned by government. So efforts during this administration has been on expanding and upgrading their facilities. Most of the power plants that they use in transmitting since 1960s, 1980s, nothing has been done on them. Even the cables, those power line cables we see up, some since the 60s, there has not been any change. So the capacity of those cables to carry power has even reduced. So the TCN has told us that in the last 3 years, since the coming of this parents' administration, they have bought 72 big power plants to transmit power taken from the GENCOs. Okay. So probably, I heard the Minister of Power, Issa Maman, saying that the additional money which they have applied for from IMF and so on is to expand the transmission terminals, the transmission cables, that they also want to expand, and so it will be used in acquiring right of way for these power lines. And so I think that's where they want to invest the money. That's the proposal.
But do you see that being productive, putting money again into transmission, when at the end of the day you're transmitting and then the discos are not able to receive and distribute?
That's the problem. So that is why I feel that there has to be, when this administration came, there was an expectation that they would work on the discos, because the arrangement ab initio,
does the privatization of discos allow government to still invest?
And that's the government, when they privatized the discos, they still held 40% shares.
So there is a share purchase agreement that allows them to do that.
Exactly. And the discos had an arrangement that they would reform the entire downstream, or what we call the disco distribution sectors. So the question is, this arrangement of privatization, was public interest put ahead, prioritized in making this arrangement? Because there have been accusations that the privatization was just simply giving these distribution companies to allies, political allies, who had no business in the first place doing anything about power.
It seemed like a matter of not having round pegs in round holes.
In round holes. We expect that it was experts who were coming to run it, and not just experts, companies that were solvent, that had enough funds. Exactly. But what we see now is that they have reneged on all the agreements. They are not metering. They are not, the poles, all the infrastructure at the distribution sector was supposed to be changed and rehabilitated by them, but they have not done anything. So the transmission company are even accusing the discos that they go to the consumers, take tariffs, take money from tariffs. For example, let's assume they take 1 million naira from the consumers, and instead of buying power from the transmission companies and what's that amount, they just buy a fraction, then keep the rest in their pockets. So the transmission company has accused them that they are not investing. They are just like profit carriers. They are just taking profits and not giving it back to the consumer. But they have also, the discos are accusing the consumers of not paying. That
so there's just a blame game going on.
Right from the gencos to the consumers. In fact, the gencos also blame gas supply. Most times, in last year alone, we had over 10 system failures. They blame that the gas suppliers don't transmit gas enough for them to power this plant. But the gas suppliers have also complained that you have a gas plant probably in Warri, in the south here, and you have a gas generation plant which generate the gencos somewhere in Jos. So transmitting gas from this place to Jos is a problem. Sometimes there might be breaches along the way, there might be vandalization. So it has been a blame game all the while between them. So the privatization was fraught from the beginning with the discos. It was discos who had no funds enough or who had no business in terms of expertise that took this, and they have not been able to perform so far. So
going forward, because putting in 1.3 trillion naira at this time, when we're talking about COVID-19, have been at the brink of recession, is a huge investment. So things have to be done rightly. What would be the role of government at this point, being that it is resolute on revamping the power sector?
Yeah, government has, in fact, the role of government in any privatized institution is regulatory. So we expect that government plays its regulatory function more efficiently. And that's where NEC comes in. NEC, which is the National Electric Regulatory Commission, has not so far protected consumers enough. The discos have so far not, they've showed obvious reluctance to meter consumers because they enjoy the free revenue they get from estimated billing. They come and give you 20,000 that you use in a month when you probably didn't use up to 1,000. So that's where NEC came in at a point and introduced the CAPME system, which is credited advance payment for metering installation. Since the disco said they didn't have money to buy meters, that arrangement was such that the consumer who is willing to buy meters would pay into an account owned by these discos, probably 45,000 for a meter. So when they pay into, discos now take it's like the companies have now bought the meters for them, then they sort of reimburse them by giving them electricity free to cover for that amount that was bought. But for 3 years, the discos, there were accusations that consumers pay into the account, they don't also buy these meters. So they came out, NEC recently came out with a map, with the meter asset providers, which are like contractors. They contract it out to capable contractors who are willing to import these meters. So consumers buy from them, are supposed to buy from these meter asset providers, and then the cost is taken by the consumer. Initially, the agreement was that the discos are to provide these meters free. But they buy these meters now, then they get, so NEC has not played this role so far. There have been so much.
So more of regulation is still necessary.
Enough of regulation. We have to do
as a wrap up, from what was said, it seemed like IMF's position that the power sector has been underinvested in is not totally correct. It's been more of doing the right thing.
Doing the right thing at each stage of the power chain, from the gencos to the transmissions to the discos.
So is it still worth giving it a try?
Yeah, if the investment is going to be in the transmission sector, expanding their capacity, expanding the rights of ways, building in more power lines, buying more power plants, in terms of transmitting, then it's fine. Because transmission is key to delivering this power from the GENCOs to the DISCOs.
Okay.
So if it's in the TCN, then it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Away from power sector, as we wrap up 1 minute, spending 18% of GDP now to 2030, what would that mean? Besides investing in the power sector, what would that mean for Nigeria? How do we do that? And
that would be fine, because infrastructure is the life wire of the economy.
Okay.
Roads, infrastructure will mean roads, railways, it facilitates business. So if there is a commitment, a genuine commitment to invest this 18% of GDP, that's quite, in fact, there are countries who do as much as 20, 30, 40%. If it is committedly and genuinely carried out, then it's a welcome development. Okay. Very welcome.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Osaze. You have for being on the show today. It's a wrap on the show. My name is Blessing Aiche. Next week, we'll bring you a fresh edition of Business This Week. Stay safe and have yourself a great weekend.